All right, apologies at the outset. I am once again under the weather and also facing another hurricane. Well, a tropical storm, Nicholas it's called. Primarily I'll get some rain, and since I'm on high ground, probably won't affect my home that much. There might be some power outage, but other than that, the other places not so lucky. It's going to be a lot of flooding, and yeah, it's the last thing they needed was more rain, especially after this year. But what are you going to do? So, continuing with Star Trek the Animated Series, the second episode, which I didn't realize was the second one. It's been a long time since I've seen these, and this is is one of the one I remember the most, and easily my favorite. Now that might change as I go through these, but I rather doubt it. This one, of course, deals with Spock having to go back in time and save his younger self. It also deals with them returning to the Guardian of Forever, which if there's any flaws here, it's like Kirk it's just a nonchalant run-of-the-mill mission after what happened to him the first time he went through that thing. Yeah, you'd think he wouldn't be all that enthusiastic. But anyway, so they're on this mission and making use of it, exploring the history of the Orion sector and stuff like that. And so Kirk and another officer come through it, and then Spock walks out of it, and then suddenly McCoy is standing there. Who's that guy? And Kirk's like, what do you mean? And nobody recognizes Spock. They beam back to the Enterprise, and it turns out an entirely new timeline has been created due to the manipulation of the Guardian. So instead of Spock, there was this Andorian who was the first officer on the Enterprise, and Spock never served. So they go through the history, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they discover that Spock had died as a young child, and then his parents had divorced and all this stuff. And so they're like, oh my god, something went wrong, so they figure it out, and then Spock remembers the scenario of his supposed death, and then also recalls having been rescued by the incident that resulted in his death. He was attacked by this animal, and it was some mysterious cousin had arrived to help him out, and he now realizes he was that cousin. So here he is performing the act that sets the timeline as he has known it. So he heads over there. He just gets this robe over his uniform. It's not much of a costume, but he does it. He goes back, and it's really cool. It sets up the history of Spock. You see him as a young boy having to deal with the bullying of the other Vulcans who didn't accept him because he's a half-breed and all that. And so you can see where the J.J. Abrams movie completely ripped that off top to bottom in the movie. But, it stands to reason that's one of the elements of Spock's young life that you would, depict. And so such was the case. And he's struggling with which path does he want to take. Does he want to be like his mother and be human, or does he want to be like his father and be Vulcan? And I mean, they're living on Vulcan, so he chooses to be Vulcan. So there's this rite of passage that they're supposed to go through to prove themselves, and Spock decides to do this early on his own. So he leaves the house, and that's when the real Spock, well, the older Spock rather, realizes, oh yeah, I forgot. He had forgotten that he had done this, because he was thinking, oh, it's supposed to be a certain date that he was supposed to do this trial or what have you. And he just wanders off to do it himself. And, well, that's where all the trouble happens. And he gets attacked by this, I forget what the creature's called, but anyway. And his pet, who he tried to tell to stay home, because you're too fat and old. But the pet loves him, so he stays and defends the boy and saves him. But unfortunately, he got some venom from the creature, And Spock ends up subduing the monster with his Vulcan pinch and all that. It ends up teaching his young self how it's done. And so they get a healer, try to help the animal, but he can't. And so young Spock decides, no, it's best to put him down and let him die with dignity. And so this is seen as a moment of maturity for him, and that he's learned his lesson and has already gone through this rite of passage. So it's a simple story, you know, but it's very good and in keeping with the overall lore of Star Trek, and of course for Mr. Spock. So but it's one of those interesting elements. He goes back, and Kirk says, well, everything's fixed now, because McCoy recognizes him and all this. And he says, well, yeah, but it's a little different. I don't, my pet died. And Kirk's like, yeah, so what? But I mean, it is indicative that, and Spock's saying that it kind of bothered him. He didn't, you know, because his pet lived a little bit longer, and it says he remembers it, but now this is no longer the case. So it's this interesting thing, and this happens each time, you could argue, with the time travel stories from Star Trek, is that little by little they're creating other alternate timelines. So it also adds for possibilities of explaining why things are a little different here and there for successive shows and whatnot. Nowhere near to the extent of where we are now. I mean, you would just have to flat out say it, and I don't know. I mean, it's the only way to to categorize the current iteration of Star Trek under Secret Hideout and all that. Because, boy, I tell you, all this time there's a little Spock running around. I didn't see any human sister there. No mention whatsoever. So, of course, it would have to be an alternate timeline and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, so there you go. Yesteryear. And interesting, and one of these things where they return to a previous episode, and I don't know what they would have done had the show had continued, and I wondered, you know, some of these episodes are reflective of the possibility, and perhaps they are, and that they could have reused that stuff, whether or not the Guardian set was still in existence for a fourth season or not, but I rather doubt that. But yeah, you know, they could have done it and revisited that. It's also, I mentioned this before, where there's supposed to be this novel that I seem to recall seeing it, where it revealed that Spock had fathered a child with what's her name, Marion Hartley, in the ice cave, and encounters the Guardian of Forever and meets his son, or something like that. I believe it's how it happened. If you read it, let me know in the comments below. But anyway, there we go. Another pretty good episode of the Star Trek The Animated Series. Thanks for watching and listening. Say, while you're still here, why not like and subscribe and share with your many friends? Yes. Also, check out my mini stores in the link description below. Yes, where you can get t-shirts, hats, mugs, all those goodies with my artwork on them. Oh, yeah. And head over to IndiePlanet.com and pick up a copy of my comic book, Night Night. Oh, yeah. You can also catch me at my podcast, Mr. Nailsin Show, on RadioMisfits.com. And you can also watch my videos on BitChute.com and now on Rumble.com. Oh, my goodness, so many places to watch me and my stuff. Oh, yeah. And if that's not enough for you, well, you can follow me on many social media platforms and say hi to your old pal, Mr. Nailsin.